Emily didn't cry when her husband left her, not even when the court papers arrived in a manila envelope with a name printed in bold that used to mean forever. She didn't cry when she had to sell her wedding ring for gas money, or when she quietly removed Henderson from her daughter's last name form at school. But on the day she sold her daughter's favorite toy to buy a loaf of bread, Emily wept like a child after Lily fell asleep. That morning had started with the usual panic, the kind that came when you opened a fridge and saw only baking soda and 3 ketchup packets. The pantry was worse. The food stamps had run out a week early, and payday from her part-time diner shift wasn't until Thursday. The landlord had already taped his 4th warning to the peeling door. She had 27 cents in her purse, 1 diaper left, and a 6-year-old daughter pretending not to be hungry. "We'll make toast," she lied, even though the bread was gone. "And we'll play picnic on the floor, just like we used to." But even Lily's soft little smile was tired now, her frame thinner than it had been last month, her cheeks hollow. That's when Emily's eyes landed on the one thing that hadn't faded in this apartment, the stuffed bear. Mr. Huggs. Worn from love, one eye missing, fur matted at the ears, but still the most precious thing in Lily's life. Emily had bought it back when they were still a family, still in the house, still believing in promises. Lily had named him Mr. Huggs because he had been there for every nap, every scraped knee, every nightmare. Selling it would feel like betrayal. But what do you do when there's nothing else left? When your child is hungry and the world has stopped offering help? She wrapped the bear in a blanket like it was something holy, whispered an apology, and told herself it was just for today, that she would get it back somehow. The thrift shop on the corner didn't ask questions. The man behind the counter gave her $5, just enough for a half loaf, a small carton of milk, and 2 apples. That night, Lily noticed instantly. "Where's Mr. Huggs?" she asked, panic in her eyes. Emily swallowed hard. "He went on an adventure," she said softly. "He's visiting someone special." Lily didn't speak for a long time. Then, in a voice far too small for her age, she asked, "Did he go like Daddy did?" That question bruised something deep in Emily's soul. She kissed Lily's forehead and whispered, "No, baby." Mr. Huggs is coming back. But Lily didn't eat her apple slices. She sat near the window the rest of the evening, watching the street, waiting. The next day passed in a blur of guilt and forced smiles. Emily tried to distract her with coloring, with songs, with made-up bedtime stories, but Lily just asked if Mr. Huggs had sent a letter. Emily lied again, and the weight of it sat like stones in her chest. But on the 3rd day, something happened. A soft knock came at the door, gentle, like someone trying not to scare a bird. Emily opened it, expecting the landlord. Instead, a man stood there, early 30s, dressed in clean denim and a dark blazer, holding a familiar bear in one hand and her daughter's hand in the other. "I believe this belongs to you," he said, smiling gently. Emily's voice caught in her throat. She reached for Lily, who was grinning wider than Emily had seen in months. "He found me," Lily said. "He said he was in the store and saw Mr. Huggs sitting all alone. And guess what, Mama? He bought him back for us." Emily met the man's eyes, stunned. "How did you know he was hers?" The man shrugged, but there was something knowing in his smile. "Sometimes you just recognize love when you see it left behind." He handed over the bear, and in his other hand, he passed her a white envelope. She opened it slowly, hands trembling. Inside was a note and a check. The note read, "A small gift, for a mother who gives everything." The check was for $2,000. Emily looked up, speechless, but the man was already turning away. "Wait," she called. Why would you do this?" He paused, hand resting on the doorframe. "Because when I was little," he said, voice quiet, My mom sold my toy truck to buy me dinner. I never forgot what that looked like on her face." Then he was gone, leaving Emily standing there, Mr. Hugs in one arm, Lily in the other, and a future she hadn't dared to imagine now trembling open like the start of a miracle. Emily stared at the check for a long time after the stranger walked away, her hands trembling as if the paper might vanish if she blinked too hard. $2,000. Not 100, not 200, an amount that, to most, might cover groceries and bills, but to Emily, it felt like someone had handed her back dignity. She looked down at Lily, who was still cradling Mr. Hugs like a miracle had been delivered in cotton and stuffing, and for the first time in months, Emily felt something close to safety trickle back into her chest. But safety didn't come easily to someone who'd lived months without it. Doubt crept in. What if the check bounced? What if this was some cruel prank, some twisted joke? The next morning, she dressed Lily in her best dress, one that still fit from last Easter, and told her they were going on an adventure. She tucked the check into her coat pocket and walked 3 blocks to the small community credit union, where she still had an account, though it had been inactive since the last auto deduction overdrew it by $9.47. The teller, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and red-rimmed glasses, gave her a polite smile. "Can I help you?" Emily hesitated, then placed the check on the counter like she was laying down something fragile. "I just want to know if it's real," she whispered. The teller took it, scanned it, and after a few quiet keystrokes, blinked and looked up. "It's very real," she said with a small smile. "Would you like to deposit it or cash it?" Emily felt her knees go soft. She deposited it, then withdrew 200 in 10s and 5s and tucked it into her purse like it was holy. She bought groceries, real ones. Eggs, cheese, chicken, fresh vegetables, even Lily's favorite cereal with the cartoon rabbit on the front. She bought shampoo, a new toothbrush, and slippers for herself that weren't falling apart at the seams. And then, as if daring herself to believe in better days, she took Lily to the diner and ordered pancakes for lunch. Lily had never eaten in a restaurant before. She kept her hands folded like she was scared someone would come take her plate away. But as she poured syrup over her second helping and leaned into her mother's side with sticky joy, Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. "He was an angel," Lily said suddenly, chewing. "The man who found Mr. Hugs. He told me God remembers people who give, even when nobody's looking." Emily blinked at her daughter. "He said that?" Lily nodded, licking her fingers. "He said Mr. Hugs told him." They laughed then. Emily, a tired, hollow sound she hadn't heard from herself in ages. But even in the laughter, questions buzzed like flies in the back of her mind. Who was he? How did he find them? And what kind of man buys back a bear, returns it with the child, and leaves a stranger with a miracle? That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Mr. Hugs nestled between her and Lily, the envelope resting on the nightstand beside a half-eaten apple. She remembered the way he'd said it. "Sometimes you recognize love when you see it left behind." Was he someone who had been through the same thing? A man who watched his mother sacrifice? Or was he someone looking for redemption himself? Emily hadn't seen a wedding ring. His clothes weren't flashy, but they were expensive in that quiet way, the kind you only notice if you've gone without. On impulse, she unfolded the note again and looked for any sign of a name. Nothing. Just the neat black ink and that one line. A small gift. For a mother who gives everything. The handwriting was neat, practiced. It didn't look corporate or like something from a charity. It looked personal. The next morning she went back to the thrift shop. The same man was behind the counter, and when she asked if he knew anything about the man who had bought the bear, the clerk nodded slowly. He comes in once a month, usually donates stuff, doesn't buy much. But that day, he looked at the bear for a long time. Then he asked me if a woman had dropped it off, said he could tell it was given up with love. Emily swallowed. Do you know his name? The clerk scratched his chin. Nope, pays cash, drives a black Audi though, and he left you this. He handed her a folded receipt. On the back, in the same neat handwriting, was a phone number and a sentence. If Mr. Huggs ever needs another adventure. Emily didn't call the number, not yet. She went home, hugged Lily tightly, and watched her sleep with crumbs on her lips and safety in her dreams. But the number stayed tucked into her coat pocket, right beside the check stub. And that night, for the first time since her divorce, Emily allowed herself a thought she'd buried long ago. Maybe not every stranger wants something. Maybe some people just give. Emily carried that folded piece of paper like it was stitched to her, slipping it into every jacket she wore, transferring it gently from pocket to pocket, like it might disintegrate if not handled with care. She didn't call. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know how. What would she say? Thank you for saving my daughter's bear. Thank you for noticing that I was barely holding it together. Thank you for giving me hope without asking for anything in return. Days passed. The check cleared. Bills got paid. The fridge no longer echoed with hollowness. Lily, now fed and bathed and sleeping soundly every night, was beginning to hum again. Little songs she made up about birds and clouds and kindness. Emily watched her like someone might watch a rare flower growing after drought. But that paper, that number, remained. She'd pick up her old phone sometimes and hover over the dial, but then she'd see her reflection in the cracked screen and remember who she still was. Divorced, forgotten, unsteady, still haunted by the way her ex-husband had looked at her the last time he slammed the door. You're just too much, he'd said on their anniversary. She had dressed up, tried to smile despite the pain, the wheelchair creaking slightly as she'd rolled into the restaurant. He didn't even finish his drink. He left her there, humiliated and abandoned, and didn't return home. 3 days later, she got divorce papers. So no, she wasn't ready to call some man who seemed too good to be true. Instead, she returned to routines. She took Lily to the park. She applied for temp jobs, remote ones she could manage from home. She started tutoring online again. But in every quiet moment, that paper whispered from her coat. One Saturday, Lily was invited to a birthday party by a girl from the shelter they'd stayed at months ago. Emily brought cupcakes, smiled politely at the other parents, and watched from a bench under the shade. That's when she saw the car, the black Audi. Same sleek frame, same subtle gleam. It was parked 2 spaces away, engine off, but no one got out. Her heart skipped. She held Lily's sweater tighter, eyes scanning the area. Minutes passed. Then the door opened. It was him. Same calm expression, tailored jacket, and something about the way he walked. Confident but soft, like a man used to silence. He wasn't there for her. He greeted a boy, maybe a nephew, and handed over a wrapped box. But then, as he turned to leave, he saw her. Their eyes met across the small parking lot. He smiled, just a hint, and gave a small nod before sliding back into the car and pulling away. That night, Emily sat with the number again. She didn't call. She wrote a message instead. It was simple. Thank you, for the bear, for the check, for noticing us. She didn't expect a reply. But the next morning, there it was. Some things don't want to stay unnoticed. Some people don't deserve to be invisible. That line wrecked her because for the first time, someone wasn't trying to fix her or pity her. He saw her. Not the disability, not the financial struggle, not the tired eyes. Her. A few days later, Lily came home from school carrying a small envelope. "A man gave this to the teacher," she said. Inside was a business card. Plain, matte black with just a name, Jack Carver. No job title, no company logo. Just a name and a new phone number. Underneath it, handwritten, "If you're ever ready for a coffee and questions." Emily laughed, startled by how it burst out of her. Coffee and questions? It was so casual, so unassuming, so not what she expected from someone who drove an Audi and gave out checks like bandages. She waited 3 more days. Then she texted, "Only if it comes with pancakes." The reply came instantly. Deal. The diner she picked was small, tucked between a laundromat and a shuttered bookstore, the kind of place where time seemed to pause and the coffee never stopped flowing. She chose it on purpose. Neutral ground, simple, and safe. Emily wore a clean blue cardigan, brushed Lily's hair twice before dropping her at a neighbor's for a playdate, and then sat by the window with her palms flat on the table to stop them from shaking. Jack arrived exactly on time. Not a minute early or late, wearing a soft gray sweater and a look that said he didn't expect her to impress him. He smiled. That same quiet smile she remembered from the funeral and the park, and slid into the booth across from her like they'd done this a dozen times before. "You made it," he said simply, and she found herself smiling back before she could think too much about it. The waitress poured them both coffee. Emily wrapped her hands around the cup like it was the only solid thing in the world. "Why did you come to that funeral?" she asked finally, her voice barely louder than the clink of the spoon in her cup. Jack didn't flinch. "He worked for me. Your ex, sort of. Not directly. But he pitched a lot of bad ideas with a lot of confidence, and one day he mentioned he had a wife and a daughter. Said he didn't need them slowing him down." Emily's jaw tightened. That sounded exactly like him. "I didn't go to mourn him," Jack added. "I went to see what he left behind. Turns out it was something far more valuable." She didn't know whether to feel flattered or violated, but he wasn't smirking. He wasn't playing at anything. He was just telling her the truth. "The toy," she said. "You bought it." He nodded. "I saw what it meant to her. I used to have something like that, a bear named Freddie. My mother stitched his ear back on 3 times. Emily laughed softly, surprised by the image. "So you bought it out of nostalgia?" He shook his head. I bought it because no child should ever have to trade comfort for survival. And no mother should ever have to make that kind of choice." The words landed somewhere deep in her chest. She took another sip of coffee, needing a second to recover. "You didn't have to give the money," she said. "That wasn't part of the toy's price." "I wasn't paying for the toy," he said gently. "I was giving you time to breathe, time to eat, time to stop being in crisis long enough to remember you're still a whole person." She blinked fast, trying not to cry in a diner over hash browns and honesty. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I mean, really?" Jack leaned back, hands resting on the table. "I want to see if you'll let me keep showing up. Not as a savior, not as a stranger, just as someone who sees what you've built from ash and wants to respect it." Emily stared at him. There was no pity in his eyes, no manipulation, just presence, quiet, strong, and steady. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "That's what coffee's for," he said. And this time, her laugh wasn't quiet. It was real. Loud and a little unsteady, but it filled the corner of that little diner like sunlight. They talked until the coffee went cold. About Lily, about his mother, about bad birthdays and worse anniversaries. And for the first time in years, Emily left a conversation feeling like she hadn't given more than she got. He didn't ask for her number, didn't push for a second meeting, just paid for the coffee and walked her to the door, pausing only to say, "You don't owe me anything. But if you ever want to talk again, I'll be here. Same booth, Wednesdays." And then he left, simple as that. No expectations, no strings, just space. And somehow that space felt more generous than any grand gesture ever had. Emily didn't plan to go back the next Wednesday. In fact, she spent most of the week telling herself she wouldn't. She convinced herself it had been a fluke, just a stranger with too much money and a tender conscience, probably bored or guilty or both. But Wednesday came anyway, as days tend to do, and around noon, her eyes drifted to the clock above the stove. She hadn't realized she was waiting until she noticed it was already 3:17 p.m. Lily was at a friend's house. A casserole dish was cooling on the counter, and the house felt too still. Before she could stop herself, she pulled on the same cardigan, slipped on her flats, and walked the few blocks to the diner. Her heart pounded harder with every step. Maybe he wouldn't be there. Maybe he would. She wasn't sure which thought scared her more. But when she pushed open the door, the little bell chiming above her head, he was already in the booth. Same one, same soft gray sweater, this time with a book in his hand and a coffee halfway gone. He looked up, and the way his face changed, gentle surprise turning to quiet welcome, made her knees feel like they had opinions of their own. "Didn't know if you'd come," he said, sliding his book aside. "I didn't either," she replied honestly, easing into the seat across from him. "But Lily's at a playdate, and the house was too quiet." He nodded like he understood that kind of quiet, the kind that doesn't soothe but echoes. They ordered coffee and pie. She told him about Lily's school project on constellations, how she'd insisted her stuffed rabbit was named Orion, and how she'd asked if poor kids could still reach the stars. Jack laughed, but there was a softness behind it, a weight. He told her about a failed attempt at sourdough during lockdown, and how his kitchen still smelled like regret. They traded stories without agenda, jokes without performance, and silences that didn't demand to be filled. When she glanced at her cup and realized it was empty, she was startled to find that 2 hours had passed. "You make it feel like time is a choice," she said suddenly. He tilted his head. "And what would you choose if it were?" She looked out the window, then back at him. Something slower, something kinder. He didn't respond with words, just reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Her stomach dropped. "Not again." "Don't worry," he said quickly, sensing her tension. "No money inside, I promise." She hesitated, then took it. Inside was a photo. Lily's toy rabbit, neatly stitched with a new button eye, sitting on a tiny chair with a small note beside it. For the girl who gave more than she had to spare. Emily stared at it, throat tight. "You kept it?" "I borrowed it," he said. "Long enough to fix what I could. I thought she might like to know someone cared enough to try." She nodded, lips trembling. "She will." "She does." Jack sipped his coffee and said nothing more. Neither did she. They didn't need to. That second Wednesday ended with no plans made, no promises exchanged. But as she walked home with the photo in her hand and warmth in her chest that hadn't been there in years, she knew she'd be back next week. And not just for the pie. It had been years since Emily let herself expect anything good without immediately preparing for its loss. But that third Wednesday came with a kind of quiet anticipation that felt almost dangerous. She baked cookies for Lily's school party that morning, humming softly as she shaped the dough, her fingers no longer stiff from fear, but moving with some odd memory of grace. She wore a pale blue scarf Jack had complimented the week before, and even dabbed a touch of perfume on her wrists. Cheap, fading, but still hers. When she arrived at the diner, Jack was already there, but this time he stood to greet her. "You look lighter," he said. Emily smiled and shrugged. "Might be the sugar rush. I licked the spoon." They sat, and their conversation picked up as if it had never paused. Jack told her about his niece who wanted to be a horse when she grew up, and Emily shared Lily's theory that clouds were where old stuffed animals retired. With every shared story, the jagged edges of her life felt less sharp. She began to notice how Jack never reached across the table without looking her in the eye first, never made a joke at her expense, never assumed he knew her story even when she shared slivers of it. "I used to think hope was for fools," she said quietly, after a long pause. Jack leaned forward. "And now?" She stirred her coffee. "Now I think maybe fools were just brave enough to believe before the rest of us caught up." He nodded, not speaking, and the silence filled with something that wasn't awkwardness. It was reverence. As they left the diner, he walked her halfway home. They paused near the park where Lily once lost a mitten and cried for 3 days. The bench looked the same, the trees just starting to hint at spring. Jack gestured to the swing set. "You ever let yourself swing anymore?" She chuckled. "I think my joints would sue me." "Mine too," he said. "But I still think about it." They didn't kiss. They didn't hold hands. But as she turned the corner toward her apartment, Emily felt the weight of years start to loosen. Inside, Lily was drawing a picture. Her, Emily, and someone else. "Who's this?" Emily asked, pointing to the tall figure with the soft smile. "That's the man from the pie place," Lily said matter-of-factly. "He brought Mr. Rabbit back. He's part of us now." Emily swallowed hard, blinking fast. She hadn't said much to Lily about Jack, only that he was kind and that he liked stories. But children see things adults miss. They sense when someone is safe. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Emily stared at the drawing for a long time. Part of her wanted to frame it. Part of her wanted to hide it. But mostly she just wanted it to be true. And for the first time in years, wanting something didn't feel like a mistake. Emily wasn't expecting to see him again so soon. Certainly not in the cereal aisle of the neighborhood grocery store, where she was comparing off-brand oats to the name brand Lily loved, but they couldn't afford. She was wearing her old coat with the buttons missing, hair pulled into a tired bun, trying to stretch every last dollar without showing Lily that she was counting. Jack's voice came from behind, casual but warm. "Still a Raisin Bran kind of woman?" Emily turned, caught mid-reach, and the laugh bubbled out before she could suppress it. "Only when I'm feeling wild," she replied, holding up the cheaper box like a trophy. He stepped closer, wheeling a half-full cart with eggs, milk, fresh strawberries. "I was hoping to bump into you," he said, eyes scanning hers with that calm steadiness that always unnerved and soothed her at once. "I wanted to show you something." From his coat pocket, he pulled out a folded piece of paper. Curious, Emily accepted it and opened it slowly. It was a printout, a flyer from a local community center. At the top, it read, "Single Parents Support Circle, Thursdays at 6 p.m., free childcare provided." She looked up. "You think I need support?" "I think you deserve not to feel so alone," he said simply. "I think Lily deserves to see her mom around people who lift her up." The sincerity in his voice stole her breath. For a moment, she almost panicked. Her heart wanted to leap forward, but her past yanked her back. "Jack, I'm not ready for all this," she said, gesturing vaguely to the idea of meetings, people being vulnerable. "That's okay," he said gently. "You don't have to be. I just wanted you to know it's there, that I'm here." And then, as if he could sense her inner trembling, he did the kindest thing imaginable. He changed the subject. "Want to help me settle a debate? Lily told me she's a pancake girl, but I think waffles are objectively superior." "Lies," Emily smirked. "We are a proud pancake household." They laughed quietly in the aisle, as if they hadn't both just stood on the edge of something deeper. And when Lily came running from the back of the store, she'd found a friend's mom and had wandered off. She lit up at the sight of Jack. "You came!" she squealed. Jack knelt to her level. "You still like strawberry syrup?" She nodded hard. "Then let's stock up." He let Lily help choose a bottle, and for that short moment, they were simply a trio. 3 people who, by fate or mercy, had collided in the middle of a mundane Tuesday. Emily held the flyer tighter in her hand as they moved to the checkout. And for once, the weight in her chest didn't come from fear or shame. It came from the terrifying, wonderful thought that maybe, just maybe, life was offering her a second draft. The community center smelled like lemon cleaner and faint hope. Emily stood at the entrance longer than she should have, her fingers twitching around the flyer Jack had given her. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. Not Lily, who thought she was just running errands, and certainly not Jack, even though he had offered to walk her in. The idea of needing a support circle still scraped against the pride she'd stitched together after her divorce, but curiosity, and something deeper, had pulled her there. Inside, folding chairs formed a loose circle, and a woman in a sunflower cardigan smiled warmly. "First time?" she asked. Emily nodded. "Grab tea or cocoa? We start in 5. She found a chair at the edge, hoping to blend in, but something shifted when she heard another woman's story. A single mom of twins who sold plasma to afford asthma medication. A grandmother raising her grandkids after her daughter disappeared. Emily's hands unclenched slowly. Her pain wasn't unique, and that didn't make it smaller. It made it shared. When her turn came, she hesitated, then surprised herself. "My name's Emily. I have a 5-year-old daughter named Lily. Her dad, he left when I was pregnant. Took everything except the hospital bill." The room didn't flinch. They nodded. Listened. "Last week, I sold Lily's favorite toy to buy groceries," she said, voice breaking. "And someone brought it back, holding her hand." Someone whispered, "Oh," but no one pitied her. Just silent, sturdy presence. Afterward, as she poured herself cocoa, the woman in the cardigan touched her shoulder. "You belong here. Not because you're broken, but because you survived." Emily nodded, throat tight. She stepped into the lobby and froze. Jack was there, leaning against the wall, holding Lily in one arm. "Surprise," he said softly. "She wanted to see where Mama went." Lily ran to her and hugged her legs, and Emily knelt, burying her face in her daughter's curls. "You okay, Mama?" Lily asked. Emily looked up at Jack, at the safe walls around her, at the warm lights above and the weightless feel in her chest. "Yeah," she said, for the first time in a long while. And when Jack offered to walk them home, Emily didn't say no. Not because she needed him to, but because she wanted to. Because maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let someone help carry the weight. Especially someone who'd already started holding her heart. The envelope looked out of place on her kitchen table, cream-colored and heavy, with her name written in ink that curled like it had taken its time. Emily had no idea how it had gotten there. Jack had picked up Lily from school that day while she worked extra hours at the library, and when she'd come home, the envelope had just been waiting. She stared at it for a long time, fingers hovering, afraid of what news might lie inside. An overdue bill, a legal notice, something that could crack the fragile calm she'd built. But when she opened it, the contents stopped her breath. Inside was a check. A real check. $5,000. And beneath it, a folded note written in neat cursive. Dear Emily, I never forgot that day. I was the one who bought Mr. Huggs. I saw your face when you handed it over, and something about it haunted me. I didn't know how to help, until Lily told me about you. She didn't know she was talking to me about her mother, of course. She just said, Mama cries at night when she thinks I'm asleep. That wrecked me. You see, I was raised by a mother who sold her wedding ring for my textbooks. I recognized the strength and sacrifice in your silence. I've seen a lot of women pretending they're fine. But I believed Lily. And I wanted to say thank you for being the kind of mother who chooses her child over everything. The world needs more people like you. This is not charity, it's repayment. For a teddy bear, that meant more than I can explain. Please accept this, and if you ever need help again, truly, call me. My number's on the back. Sincerely, Mason Lynn, Founder, Lynn Foundation. Emily stared at the letter as tears pooled. She reread it twice, then flipped the check to the back. There indeed was a number, and beside it a postscript. P.S. Lily said you make the best pancakes. I'd like to try them sometime. Her laughter broke the quiet like morning sun cutting through fog. Not because of the money, though it would cover rent and groceries for the next 2 months, but because someone had seen her. Really seen her. Not as a woman in need, not as a divorced mother, not as a failure, but as a person trying her best. She folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and looked at Lily, who was playing on the floor, her new Mr. Huggs beside her. Hey, sweetheart, Emily said, brushing a tear from her cheek. How do you feel about pancakes for dinner? The smell of vanilla and butter filled the kitchen as Emily flipped the last pancake onto the stack. Her movements slower than usual, almost reverent, as if she were folding something sacred into the batter. Lily sat at the table with syrup smeared on her chin, humming quietly as she cradled the new Mr. Huggs. This one not from a thrift store or yard sale, but brand new, gifted by the same man who had somehow changed their lives with a letter. The quiet felt full, not empty, like the stillness that comes when something heavy has been lifted from your chest. Emily sat down across from her daughter and smiled, watching her little girl eat like she didn't have a single worry in the world. And for once, neither did she. It wasn't about the money, though that brought undeniable relief. It was about being seen, acknowledged, and honored by a stranger who remembered a moment most people would have let pass. She was still wrapping her mind around it when her phone buzzed. It was a text. Hi, this is Mason Lynn. I didn't want to intrude, but I meant what I said in the letter. I'd love to take you both out for lunch sometime, or breakfast, or just coffee. No strings, just thanks. Let me know. Emily stared at it, heart hammering. She hadn't dated since the divorce, hadn't let herself imagine anyone ever looking at her as more than a woman with baggage and bills. But the tone of the message, gentle, respectful, without expectation, softened something inside her. She looked at Lily. Would you like to meet the nice man who gave us that letter? Lily nodded enthusiastically, syrup dripping down her elbow. Can I wear the purple dress? Emily laughed, her throat tight. You can wear anything you want, baby. That weekend, they met Mason at a park cafe. He was younger than she expected, with warm eyes and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. He didn't talk about business or success. He asked Lily about school, about her drawings, about Mr. Huggs. He looked at Emily like she was someone who mattered, not someone to be pitied. And as they walked home later that day, Lily skipped ahead while Emily and Mason trailed behind, talking about everything and nothing. There was no promise made, no romance declared, but a seed had been planted. not just between her and Mason, but inside Emily herself. A belief that she wasn't invisible, that her story wasn't over, that maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world who saw her not as a woman broken by life, but as a mother who had fought like hell and won something more valuable than any check could buy: dignity, hope, and the chance to write the rest of her story on her own terms. Please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the strength in struggle and the miracles in everyday kindness. If someone had handed you that envelope, what would you have done next? Tell us in the comments.